Hi everybody. Today I would like to talk a little bit about sewing with wool, and I have a whole stack of body parts here. And one of the things that I get a lot of questions about is sewing with wool because some people are afraid of it and they don't know what to do with it. They think that it's really thick and fuzzy and horrible, but wool is the best. So what I have here is kind of a weirdo collection because almost everything here is, well, I'll just say that it's like underlined. Okay, so if you sew clothes, you know that sometimes you're just working with a single type of fabric and you just sew those two pieces of fabric together and then you get what you get. But what I've got going on here is layers and layers of fabric, and I do it for different reasons. Okay, so this first example here, you see I've got a body outline and then these are two arms. So I make my dolls with the different body parts being different colors, but what we have here actually is, everything is sewn right sides together. So the colors of the final piece is going to be this beige, and this is for a prairie dog. But what I have done is sewn this with what's going to be an inner layer, and now it's on the outside of this very thick, I think, kind of ugly wool plaid. So I have a lot of it. I'm never going to use this for an animal, but it's absolutely fantastic for bulking up a thin fabric, which is what this is. This is a very lightweight suiting fabric. And the thing about wool, or actually any fabric, is when you sew it together and you stuff it, you can kind of tell the weight of the fabric. So I'm kind of running my finger underneath this piece of wool here. And when you have a thin fabric, anything underneath, any lumpiness really shows in a lightweight fabric. So for those of you that are used to sewing quilting cottons or muslin, you know all about this because those thin fabrics show every bump and crease. And so to get away from that, one thing you can do is underline with something that's thicker and puffier. So you can use interfacing, but I don't do that because I don't like to pay for anything. And I have a ton of this stuff, and this is a nice, thick, kind of spongy wool. Now, all of my wools have been washed in hot water, so they are either felted or fulled, so they're very stable. But in this case, by adding this extra layer, when I turn this whole thing right side out, it's going to have a lot of heft. It's going to have a lot of sponginess. So when I go ahead and stuff the final pieces, they're not going to show all of those little bumps and creases. So it provides some visual heft, and when you're actually touching the body parts, they feel like they have something underneath them. They feel a little more, I don't know, I guess the word is serious. They feel like they have more substance, and they do because they have all of this extra fabric. So all you have to do is just, put your things right sides together like you would normally, and then put whatever fabric you want on the outside. In this case, I traced my pattern pieces, and then my method is to just sew on the line. So then I'll just go ahead and cut this out and turn it as I would normally. Okay, so in this case, I'm adding extra wool to a thin wool for some heft. Okay, so now here I have another body, and this is going to be a badger. And this is actually a very, very thick, fuzzy wool. But the thing about it is that it's kind of I don't know, it has like a weird stretchiness, a weird springiness. It's very soft and it's very nice. But the difficulty with a fabric like this is when you're stuffing it, sometimes it has too much springiness and you get these body parts that just keep growing and growing and growing. So in this case, what I've done is I've underlined with, this is an old sheet. It's very soft, it's thin, it's a little bit worn, and yes, it's kind of ugly, but it's never going to show, right? So who cares what that looks like? So all you do is you put it on. Again, you have your main fabrics right sides together, and then I'm using two layers of this, one on the front and one on the back. And then, I just trace my pattern piece and I sew right on this. So what this does, this fabric here doesn't stretch, right? It's thin, but it's very stable. So what this is going to do is maintain the soft sponginess of the wool that I want, but it's not going to allow it to stretch out of shape. Okay, so this is, I could use interfacing, but again, I don't buy extra stuff, and I have a ton of scrap fabric, and you can use your ugly fabrics for stuff like this. It's absolutely perfect. Okay, so again, we've got another wool, and this is a very thin wool. This is actually, I think, like a wool polyester blend, and it has kind of a, you can see it's a little bit see-through here, right? So in this case, this is going to be a smaller figure, so I don't want so much heft. I don't want to add extra thickness, but I don't like that loose weave, that thin weave. So again, I'm adding a layer. This is actually quilting fabric, I think, that somebody gave me. I'm adding a layer to the front and the back just to give it a little bit of, well, I don't know. I mean, it's not necessarily strength. It's just I don't want to be able to see through it. I want a little more solidity to the weave. So that's why I'm underlining in this case. Okay. So here I have, this is going to be a little bat body, and this was from a jacket, right? So this was actually already fused with an interfacing. So this is nice because it's a knit interfacing, so it's very flexible, so it doesn't alter the hand of the fabric. And in this case, I will use interfacing for something like this. And then the rest of the body, this is black, and black is hard to work with because you can't see where you have to stitch. So I traced the body parts on in chalk, and when you're sewing, you get little puffs of dust, and it's kind of annoying. And I had to do a lot of these, so I just got tired of it. So on the next one, this is going to be the bear. This is actually a different fabric, and it's thinner. But I didn't want to go through the whole chalk thing, so I just added another layer of, again, this is like an ugly quilting fabric, and then there's a different one on the back. It's just a lightweight, I don't even know what this is. So they don't have to match, right? They don't have to be the same. And then I traced on this, and it was just easier to see. So in this case, it doesn't really alter the fabric too much. This is a very dense, this one happened to felt quite a bit. It's still relatively thin, but it's not going to add too much to the heft. And since this is going to be a bigger doll, you're not going to have any difficulty turning anything right side out. So a lot of people are afraid to use wool because they think that it's fuzzy and it's going to gum up their machine. And yes, it can be fuzzy. So what you want to do is you want to wash all your fabrics first, wash them in hot water, and then a cold, cold rinse so that they will shrink as much as they're going to. Then you throw them in the dryer, and then you're going to get rid of a lot of the lintiness that way. Okay, and then your fabrics are going to be stable, and they are fantastic to use. You will get some little fibers coming out everywhere, especially when you're cutting your fabric. So when I cut everything out here, I have to go over with the vacuum, and you will get little bits down in your machine. You just clean your machine when you're done. Okay, you should be cleaning your machine all the time anyway, so don't let it slide when you're working on wool. But the great thing about wool, well, let's see, it's hard to see anything with black. The great thing about wool, though, is even thin wools like this one, is that the stitches absolutely sink into them. So even though I'm using gray thread here, I could be using hot pink neon thread, and you could pull on this seam and you would not be able to see that thread. Okay, wool is absolutely a dream to sew on a sewing machine, and it's absolutely perfection to sew and stitch by hand, which is why I use it so much. So I thought you might enjoy a little peek into the mysteries of sewing with wool in the Agosia Arts studio. See you next time. Bye-bye.